This is episode 22 of Watching Every Ghibli Movie. Today I watched Aya to Maho, or Earwig and the Witch, and this film came out just recently in 2020. Spoiler warning, and stick around to the end of the video for a semi-important announcement. I wonder what the first thing I should address about this movie is. I wonder what could possibly set it apart from other films by Studio Ghibli. The CG is fine. It mostly looks good, I think. Obviously, it's nothing short of mind-boggling that a 3D film would come out of Studio Ghibli specifically, but it happened. And yeah, you heard me right. I think this movie looks good. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think it looks as good as pretty much every other Ghibli film I've talked about so far, and it obviously has a very, very different visual appeal than many of those movies. And so, to a viewer who comes to Studio Ghibli for Studio Ghibli's established aesthetic, try saying that 5 times fast, I completely understand being turned off by Earwig and the Witch. But personally, I don't mind the CG much at all. A couple characters look a little janky, most notably and most unfortunately being the main character, Aya, but everyone else looks good, especially those with much more exaggerated features like the Mandarake's ears and facial structure. Moreover, I think that the animation was pretty good, effects work was good, color palette, directing, all of it is only ever serviceable at worst. The backgrounds, though, are definitely a highlight, and it's kind of a shame that we spend most of the time in the house, because on the few occasions that we do venture out into a location that isn't just an indoor residential room, the backgrounds alone were often enough to hold my attention. I really dislike the stigma against CG animation that I think a lot of anime watchers have, and I just wish people would realize that computer generation isn't inherently bad. If it's done poorly, then it will look bad, but if it's done well, it will look good. The same can be said for 2D animation or literally any other form of animation. If most CG anime look bad, it's not because CG is ugly, it's because the people making it didn't do CG well. I don't know if this will ever manifest into a video, but I do tentatively have plans to make a video related to this issue, so I should stop myself in case I do end up making it. Focusing back on Earwig, I thought it was interesting how Western it appears to be versus how much it deviates from movies of the genre. Thinking back on the other movies about foster kids getting adopted, or just the broader tropes of kids being moved into a new home, the new environment is almost always treated as concerning or even threatening to the main characters. But in Earwig, Aya doesn't even express much of any fear towards the house or the people she's now living with, even though doing so would be understandable. She only ever seems annoyed that they make her do a bunch of work. And this does considerably lower the stakes in my opinion, however, I wouldn't say that that's inherently a bad thing. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that it's a breath of fresh air compared to most other Ghibli movies. Coming off the heels of 2 films that I didn't really think earned their emotional climaxes, I was pleasantly surprised that Earwig didn't pretend to be a more emotionally powerful film than it is. For instance, I like how Aya is initially portrayed as genuinely manipulative, which is a stark contrast to just about every other Ghibli girl. She makes a point to express how she wants everyone to do what she wants from the start of the film all the way up to the credits. And what's so cool about why she doesn't end up feeling like as much of a brat by the end of the movie isn't so much about her own personal growth as it is our understanding of her as a character. Because while she does want everyone to do what she wants, her way of getting them to do so is by being nice to them and doing them favors. Like, if her orphanage mother didn't occasionally give her gifts, even though Aya was by all accounts super well behaved, the orphanage mother would kinda come across as the one being selfish. Furthermore, Aya is remarkably hardworking given the circumstances she's living in. She rarely complains or talks back, and she doesn't seem to wish any genuine ill will on anyone else. And so, as this all becomes more and more apparent as the story progresses, you steadily get the sense that Aya is actually a good kid, and that this is just her quirky way that she phrases the idea of being nice to people so that they'll return the favor. It's not mastermind writing by any stretch. On multiple occasions, the film has Aya just sit alone in her room and say out loud something like, "I miss custard," or "Man, I've never slept alone before." Not very subtle. Or when Aya feeds the worms into the hole in her wall and somehow thinks that she's sending them into the bathroom instead of Mandarake's room. Like, just earlier she looked through that hole and saw his room. Did she literally develop amnesia? That was stupid. Or after Aya hears the Mandarake story and her whole personality kinda shifts to be more explicitly empathetic, even though the story she just heard wasn't like that endearing. But ultimately, I was able to largely look past that stuff because of what I mentioned earlier about this being a lower stakes film, as well as because it's just shorter than what I've gotten used to. Seriously, I very much appreciate the fact that this is only an hour and 20 minutes. It definitely feels like the movie is trying to keep the pace a bit more brisk, which I am all in favor of. In other news, I'd like to call attention to Studio Ghibli's weird fascination with foster parents over the last few entries. From Up on Poppy Hill, The Tale of Princess Kaguya, When Marnie Was There, and now this movie too, all involve non-biological families. What is going on? Speaking of those biological families, I think I'd better address Yaga Bella and the Mandarake directly. I like him. I really enjoy the dynamic between the two, with Yaga being consistently afraid of Mandarake and him just seemingly having the most intense moments of rage or frustration imaginable whenever anything gets in his way. It was also a fantastic way to kick off the second act of the film by having Mandarake just become this gigantic shadow demon thing right before they adopted Aya. That was crazy, and it definitely built intrigue for the rest of the movie. I will say that Yaga did get a bit repetitive and annoying as she just keeps shutting down Aya and telling her to keep working on magic spells that never become relevant to the plot. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm still not sure as to what the spell that Aya and Thomas put on themselves did. Apparently, it was supposed to make Yaga unable to hurt them, but like, she wasn't physically hurting them, and she continues to work Aya to the bone the following day. The only difference is that now Aya is all cranky, but like, is that because she didn't get any sleep the previous night, or was that the effect of the spell? Thomas didn't get the whole enchanted words part completely right, so is it supposed to be that this was the effect of the spell, but it was just unintentional? Personally, I thought Thomas was sus from the moment he started talking about helping Aya cast a spell, so maybe this was the plan all along, who knows? Honestly, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that just kinda doesn't get resolved or elaborated on, even though it is pretty interesting. Like, what the hell was with the redhead witch, who I think is Aya's mom, showing up at the end of the movie? In fact, is it not implied that the Mandarake is her father, since he and the mom definitely had a thing going on back when the band was still together? And more on that, did the band actually get back together? Did the adults make up? I think, but I'm not entirely sure. In a lot of ways, this movie feels kind of like the precursor to a 12-episode series that goes into more detail about the lives of these adults and how they all come together after their falling out while learning to incorporate and care for a new member of their little family. Or maybe that's just me extrapolating too much out of the ending sequence, which was great. Very fun to see these characters in 2D, which they do admittedly look better in. Also, I like the song they played over it. The music overall was very fun in this movie, despite being quite the departure from what's normal for Studio Ghibli. While this is a very weird film and a very jarring one compared to the rest of Studio Ghibli's library, I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it. Maybe it's because I had lower expectations, maybe I would have liked it less if I wasn't in the context of going through Ghibli's entire history, but either way, I liked it, and I'm gonna give this one a solid 6 out of 10. And before I ask you what you thought of this movie, I'd like to do a quick update for this series. So this is the most recent movie that is listed as being under the Studio Ghibli moniker. However, that does not mean that this video series is over. As a few people have pointed out, there are a handful of Ghibli films that were made by basically the same group of people who would later become Studio Ghibli, but they were released before the company had been founded, and so they are not technically considered Ghibli movies. However, since this video series is very much meant to be in celebration of the spirit of Studio Ghibli and the influence it has had on animation, I find it nothing but appropriate to go back and watch these films as well. Problem is, I've been looking at Wikipedia and my anime list to figure out which movies to cover in each episode, but I'm not sure if those sources are accurately representative of the consensus on which movies are communally considered proto-Ghibli, for lack of a better term. And here is where I ask for your help. Wikipedia lists The Great Adventure of Horace, Prince of the Sun, Panda Go Panda, Lupin III, Castle of Cagliostro, Jarinko Chie, Gauche the Cellist, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, The Red Turtle, Mary and the Witch's Flower, and Modest Heroes, all as films that are sometimes grouped together with the studio's library. If anyone can verify that this is a complete list of proto-Ghibli movies, then that would be very helpful. Several of them were released after the studio was founded, so I'm not exactly sure how they fit into the greater Ghibli zeitgeist. I'll probably just cover all of them to be safe, but if this list is missing any, or if any of these films should definitely not be considered Ghibli movies, I would seriously appreciate it if you let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for checking out these videos episode by episode. I am incredibly happy I decided to start up this series because I really did need an excuse to watch these movies, and reading all of your comments every time is just so heartwarming. I swear, these videos have some of the best comment sections on all of YouTube, and I can't wait to keep watching these movies along with you guys, because evidently this endeavor is far from over. Not just because of the films I'm going back to, but also because I do plan to make one of these about every Ghibli film that will get released in the future. It's called Watching Every Ghibli Movie, after all. So I hope to see you all in future episodes. Let me know what you thought about Earwig and the Witch down in the comments, and next time I'll be checking out... well, I'm not actually sure. I guess that's partly up for you guys to decide. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Do have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.